Mary Lima wasn't just another face in the thousands that populated Rio de Janeiro. Oh no, at 38, with a smile that defied the daily grind and eyes that held secrets from a past few could imagine, she was the cleaning queen of Vertex Capital. And no, I'm not talking about a nickname given affectionately by colleagues. I'm talking about the raw and often cruel reality of wearing a cleaning uniform in one of the city's largest multinational investment firms. Just imagine, floor after floor of gleaming marble, mirrored offices that seemed to scream money, and there she was, with her cleaning cart, moving like an invisible ninja among the suited executives. But this invisibility was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it allowed Mary to observe everything, absorb information, overhear whispered conversations in empty hallways, and the walls of Vertex held more market gossip than a society column. On the other hand, this same invisibility translated into pure disdain. "Good morning, Mary" was a luxury few afforded her. Most times it was a muffled cough, a dismissive "excuse me," or worst of all, the look that saw right through her, as if she were a ghost who only existed to keep things clean. And in this corporate circus, the main clown, or rather the main villain, was Arthur Brando. Oh, Arthur, director of operations, heir to one of the partners, with a pearly white smile that only served to mask an ego the size of Sugarloaf Mountain. To Arthur, Mary wasn't a person. She was a tool, a walking mop, a vacuum cleaner with legs. He loved to crack sarcastic jokes about the value of manual labor right in front of her, or deliberately drop crumbs to test the efficiency of the cleaner. Once he even forgot a $100 bill on the floor, watching from afar to see if she would take it. Mary, with the dignity of a queen, cleaned around the bill and left it untouched, a silence that spoke volumes. He never tried anything like that again. Despite everything, Mary had a silent code of honor. She never complained, never. Her movements were precise, her efficiency impeccable. She knew every corner of that building like the back of her hand. She knew which door creaked on the 5th floor, which light bulb was about to burn out on the 10th, and even which project manager liked bitter coffee at 7:30 a.m. It was knowledge that went far beyond cleaning, a mental map of Vertex Capital that no one else possessed. And it was on a grey Tuesday morning that Mary's routine was turned upside down. She was polishing the reception desk on the ground floor, the same desk where for years she had been ignored by hurried executives. The phone rang, the receptionist answered, and what Mary overheard made her almost drop the all-purpose spray. "Miss Martha Lima?" a robotic voice asked from behind the counter. Martha, confused, pointed at herself. Invitation to an internal promotion interview for operations manager. If lightning had struck in the middle of the reception area, it wouldn't have caused less of an impact. Martha felt her stomach churn. Operations manager? Her? The cleaning lady? The prank was obvious. Arthur must be behind this. It was another one of his tasteless jokes, but this one was particularly cruel. A pang of anger mixed with the surprise. How could they be so inhumane, to toy with someone's hope like that? She accepted the invitation, of course, not out of naivete, but out of unwavering curiosity. What were they up to? And deep down, a small, stubborn part of her wondered, what if? What if by some miracle it wasn't a prank? What if, by a lapse of sanity, someone in that giant company had finally noticed that there was more to Martha than just a cleaning uniform? The doubt was a sweet poison, and Martha, against all good sense, decided to take it. In the days that followed, a buzz began to spread through the Vertex corridors. The cleaning lady was going to have an interview. Stifled giggles, curious glances. Arthur Brando, with his smug smile, seemed to be having a lot of fun. For him, it would be a private show, a public humiliation that would serve as a lesson to anyone who dared to dream too big. He didn't know, of course, that he was about to light a fuse that would explode in his own face. Martha, in turn, didn't prepare for the interview by reading business books or reviewing management concepts. She already had them. Years of observation, attentive listening, silent analysis of the successes and failures of Vertex's geniuses had transformed her into a hidden strategist. While cleaning the whiteboards in the meeting rooms, she absorbed the charts, the plans, the projections. While emptying the trash cans, she listened to employees' frustrations with inefficient processes. She had a mental map of Vertex that no one, not even Arthur, possessed, and it was about to be unfolded. The question that hung in the air was, were they ready for what was to come? And are you ready to find out what Martha had up her sleeve? The meeting room was a spectacle in itself, not a spectacle for the eyes, but for the soul. The scent of expensive coffee hung in the air, mixed with the imported perfume of the tailored suits. At the head of the mahogany table, with a smile bordering on scorn, was he, Arthur Brandot. Beside him, other Vertex directors, some curious, others with bored expressions, and one or two with a hint of discomfort. This was the examining board for the interview that Martha was sure was a farce. Martha entered the room with the dignity of someone who knew exactly where she was stepping, and why. Her eyes scanned the room. He saw the intern in the corner, surreptitiously with his phone on, probably recording everything to post on social media later. Arthur never missed an opportunity to make the humiliation public, but Mary wasn't easily fazed. On the contrary, she felt a different energy, a strange calm washing over her. It was the calm of someone with a secret, a hidden card nobody expected. Arthur began the interrogation with a honeyed voice, almost condescending. "So, Mary, thank you for coming. We know your time is valuable. We're here for your promotion interview to operations manager." He paused dramatically, as if expecting applause. Nobody applauded. "Tell us, Mary, what would you do as operations manager, considering your experience?" The last word was laden with such heavy sarcasm, it was almost palpable. The other directors exchanged glances. Some chuckled softly. The intern focused the camera on Mary with an anticipatory smirk. They expected stammering, apologies, maybe a sheepish, "I don't know." They expected confirmation that she was nothing more than a cleaning lady, dazzled by a chance that would never be hers. But Mary surprised them, and it wasn't with what she said first, but with what she didn't do. She didn't stammer, she didn't blush, she didn't look down. Instead, she settled in her chair, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice was calm, firm, clear, and what came out of her mouth left everyone speechless. "Well, Mr. Brandot," she began, and Arthur flinched slightly, caught off guard by the formal and confident address. "As operations manager, my first initiative would be to optimize the data flow between the market analysis and portfolio management departments. I've observed a significant bottleneck in communication, resulting in duplicated efforts and delays in strategic decision-making in at least 15% of last quarter's projects." A heavy silence fell over the room. The smiles vanished. Arthur blinked. The other directors looked at each other, confused. The intern, who had been laughing moments before, froze with his phone in hand. Nobody expected that, not from Mary. She continued, unfazed. "To mitigate this, I suggest implementing a unified CRM system with integrated BI modules, allowing a 360-degree view of the client and investment performance. I believe this could generate operational cost savings of at least 8% in the first year, as well as increase agility in responding to market fluctuations." It was as if an alien had taken over Mary's body. Where were the cleaning lady's answers? Where was the expected humility? There stood a strategist, speaking a language that even Arthur Brandot, the great operations director, struggled to keep up with. He tried to compose himself, a blush creeping up his neck. "Mary, with all due respect, how would you know all this?" And that's when Martha dropped her first bombshell. A slight smile played on her lips, a smile that held years of silence and observation. "Oh, Mr. Brandot, while cleaning the meeting rooms, I read the reports. While emptying the trash cans, I listened to the analysts' complaints about the outdated systems. And while polishing the computer screens, I observed the patterns, the repetitive errors, the inefficiencies costing Vertice millions." The air in the room grew heavy. Arthur swallowed hard. The trap he'd set was turning against him, and Martha was just getting started. What else did this woman, whom they saw only as a shadow, hide? And what would Arthur do with this unexpected revelation? The stage of humiliation was about to transform into the stage of an epic turnaround. The bomb explodes. Who is Martha Lima really? The silence in the meeting room was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Arthur Brandot, who just minutes ago was brimming with arrogance, now looked like he'd swallowed a whole lemon. His eyes, previously full of scorn, were wide with shock. The other directors, who had barely concealed their boredom, were now fixated on Martha, as if she were the eighth wonder of the world. The intern, poor guy, was holding his phone so shakily that the images must have been blurry. But let's face it, nobody cared about the quality of the recording at that moment. "But how?" stammered one of the directors, who seemed to have forgotten his own name in his astonishment. Martha smiled, a smile that went far beyond irony. It was the smile of someone who could finally play their cards on the table after years of holding a royal flush. "Gentlemen, my experience in management isn't limited to overhearing conversations while cleaning. It comes from a slightly more academic and practical place than you imagine." And then she dropped the second bombshell, which made the first one seem like a harmless firecracker. "I have a degree in economics from the Federal University of Bahia." Arthur's jaw nearly hit the floor. The intern gasped. Gjöfbe, one of the most renowned universities in the country, the cleaning lady. It had to be a cruel joke. But Martha's voice was firm, without a hint of playfulness. After graduation, she continued, I worked for almost a decade in international NGOs in conflict zones, mainly in the Middle East and Africa. My role was to develop and implement economic and social restructuring projects in war-torn areas. I led multicultural teams, negotiated with rival factions for access to resources, created supply chains from scratch in hostile environments, and managed complex budgets with scarce resources. The room fell into an even deeper silence, if that were possible. The words Middle East, Africa, conflict zones, negotiated with rival factions, echoed in the air like gunshots. These suit-clad men, accustomed to negotiating millions in air-conditioned rooms, couldn't process it. This woman, whom they barely noticed, possessed more crisis management and resourcefulness than all of them combined. Arthur, pale, tried one last gambit. Martha, please. With all due respect, this is unbelievable. And if all this is true, why on earth are you here cleaning this company's floors? The question came out as a mixture of disbelief and despair. Martha looked at him, and for the first time there was a flicker of something beyond calmness, a hint of pain quickly overtaken by unwavering strength. That's a fair question, Mr. Brando. Life sometimes plays tricks on us. I was at the peak of my humanitarian career, about to assume a global leadership position, when my father fell ill. A degenerative disease, requiring constant and very expensive care. He was everything to me. I returned to Brazil, to Rio. She paused, her eyes fixed on Arthur, as if wanting to make sure he was understanding every word. I needed a job, quickly, something that would give me money for treatments and had a fixed schedule so I could take care of him. Cleaning Vertice Capital, incredibly enough, was the position that best fit my urgent reality. And yes, it allowed me to be close to my father until his last day. He passed away 6 months ago. A chill ran through the room. Martha's confession, so raw and honest, struck everyone. The story of the cleaner was, in fact, the story of an unlikely heroine, a brilliant strategist who made the ultimate sacrifice for love of family. And the humiliation that Arthur and his accomplices tried to inflict on her now turned against them with overwhelming force. The intern, who until then had been recording non-stop, lowered his phone. His eyes were teary. He was no longer recording to laugh, but to witness something extraordinary. That video would be much more than Arthur expected. It would be proof that talent and dignity are not measured by position, but by the essence of who one is. And that Vertice Capital had just underestimated the most brilliant woman who had ever walked its halls. What would happen when this video exploded on the internet? What would be the price of Arthur's arrogance? And how would Vertice, a company that valued its image so much, deal with the bomb Martha had just dropped? The air in the Vertice Capital meeting room was still heavy with the bomb Martha had just dropped. Arthur Brando, once the predator, now looked like a cornered prey. His eyes, which once shone with malice, were clouded with panic. The other directors, previously indifferent, now looked at Arthur with a mixture of disgust and concern. The atmosphere was tense, but what was about to happen would transform this tension into a hurricane. As Mary finished her explanation about her father, the intern, who until then had seemed petrified, began to tremble, not from fear but from contained excitement. He had it all. Arthur's initial humiliation, Mary's turnaround, the revelation of her academic and humanitarian past, and the moving confession about why she was there. It was pure gold, a movie script unfolding right before his eyes and on his phone screen. Without anyone immediately noticing, with a quick click and an almost imperceptible movement of his fingers, the intern sent the video to a group of friends. From there, the speed would be exponential. The internet is a boundless universe, and Mary's story was the kind of fuel that makes this universe explode. Minutes after Mary left the room, Vertice Capital began to feel the first tremors. It wasn't long before the video titled "The Cleaning Lady Who Silenced the Suits," or Vertice's Unknown Heroine, began popping up on social media. First, in closed groups of university students. Then, on the profiles of digital influencers focused on career and overcoming challenges. In a few hours, Mary Lima's story was a digital wildfire. Comments and shares exploded. "This woman is a genius." Second-hand embarrassment for those directors. "Her dignity is worth more than all the money in this company." "Cleaning lady. This is the true CEO Vertice needs." The hashtag #OneMaryLima@Vertice started trending. People from all over Brazil and even the world began to speak out. Renowned journalists, market analysts, CEOs of other companies, everyone wanted to understand who this woman was and why she was cleaning floors instead of leading board meetings. Arthur Brandão, oblivious to the brewing storm, left the meeting room fuming. He was furious, humiliated, and still trying to understand how his prank had gone so wrong. He didn't notice the strange looks from employees in the hallways, the whispers that ceased when he passed. The bubble of his arrogance still protected him from the imminent reality, but the bubble soon burst. The first to feel the impact was the public relations department. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails from journalists, inquiries from worried investors, and even a statement from the CVM, Securities and Exchange Commission equivalent, requesting clarification on the company's conduct and its selection processes. Vertis Capital's shares, which had been rising, began to show a slight decline, a warning sign that no director ignored. The company's image, built with so much care and investment, was being pulverized by a cleaning lady's video. That's when the CEO of Vertice, a stern and pragmatic man, received the video link from his own teenage son with the message, "Dad, you won't believe what your company did. You guys went too far." Watching the video, the CEO's usually impassive face contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. He saw Mary's humiliation, the revelation, and the director's reaction, including his right-hand man, Arthur. The rage was due to the negative exposure. The disbelief stemmed from having a rare gem like Mary within his company and no one noticing. By this time, Mary had already finished her shift, oblivious to the chaos her video was causing. She took the bus thinking about her father's next appointment, his medication. She couldn't imagine that, in a few hours, her name would be on everyone's lips and that Vertex Capital would be in an uproar, trying to contain the avalanche of criticism and the image crisis that was falling upon it. The game had turned. The planned humiliation had transformed into a brutal act of self-exposure for Vertex. Arthur Brandão, the architect of the farce, was about to reap the bitter fruits of his arrogance. But what would Vertex do now? How would a company that prided itself on its reputation react to a scandal of national proportions? And what would happen to Mary, the woman who unintentionally became the personification of dignity against corporate arrogance? Vertex Capital was in flames, and the internet was the fuel. The CEO, once a bastion of corporate calm, now paced back and forth in his breathtaking office, his face red with contained fury. The image crisis was unprecedented. Calls poured in from all sides, furious shareholders, board members worried about plummeting stock value, and the media thirsty for a scandal. Mary's video was the top story on all news portals and television newscasts. "Locate that woman now and bring her here with all honors," the CEO growled at his assistant, an impeccable woman who was trying in vain to hide her own astonishment at the situation. And Arthur Brandão? Where is Arthur Brandão? Arthur, in turn, was having the worst day of his life. He, the crown prince of Vertex, the untouchable, was now the national villain. His cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating with hate messages and threats on social media. His inbox was overflowing with internal HR communications, all with a serious and urgent tone. Friends and colleagues who had previously fawned over him now ignored him or made snide remarks. The icing on the cake was the call from his father, one of Vertex's founding partners. His father's usually severe voice was a mixture of disappointment and icy rage. "Arthur, what in the hell did you do?" His father's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You not only humiliated a decent person, but you threw the name of our family and Vertex in the mud. Our stock is plummeting, Arthur. Plummeting. Do you have any idea what that means?" Arthur tried to defend himself, stammering flimsy excuses about misunderstood jokes and internet exaggeration, but his father wasn't listening. Reputation to him was worth more than millions, and Arthur had destroyed it all in a matter of hours. The unraveling was swift and brutal. In an emergency board meeting, lasting mere minutes, the decision was unanimous and implacable. Arthur Brandão would be suspended from his position, effective immediately. It wasn't a formal dismissal yet, but a suspension pending internal investigation, which in corporate jargon means you're out but we'll try to minimize the damage. He would be the perfect scapegoat for the crisis. While Arthur received the news, pale, shocked, as if reality had finally hit him like a punch to the stomach, Mary was at home, in her modest apartment, completely oblivious to the hurricane she had unleashed. Her phone, which rarely rang for anything other than bills, began to vibrate insistently. Unknown numbers, text messages from people she'd never seen, and an alarming volume of notifications from social media platforms she barely used. One name in particular caught her attention: Robert Mendez. He was one of the Vertis board members, a respected gentleman, known for his integrity and for being one of the few who hadn't participated in that farce in the meeting room. Mary remembered seeing a flicker of discomfort in his eyes during the interview. Mendez's message was short, but weighty. "Mary, please call me as soon as you can. It's urgent and important. I have a proposal that could change your life. Robert Mendez." Mary hesitated. Her first reaction was suspicion. Another prank. But the way the message was written, the respectful tone, was unlike anything she had received from Vertice before, and Robert Mendez's name inspired some confidence. She called. The conversation was surprising. Mendez was direct, apologizing on behalf of the company for the humiliation and praising Mary's courage and intelligence. He explained the gravity of the situation at Vertis, Arthur's suspension, and the urgent need for a response. And then he made the offer. "Mary, the CEO and the board want you back, not as operations manager, but for a position we consider even more crucial at this moment. We want you to help us redesign our internal culture. We want you to be our talent scout, the person who will find other Marys hidden within Vertice. What do you say?" Mary listened in silence. A mix of emotions washed over her: relief, surprise, but also a hint of skepticism. Would she be a trophy for Vertis to clean up its image, a marketing ploy, or a real chance to make a difference? Vertis Capital was at her mercy, desperate to reverse the chaos, and Mary, the cleaning lady who turned the corporate world upside down, now had the power to dictate her own rules. What would she do with this golden opportunity? And how would her return to Vertex change not only her life, but the entire company's? Marta's triumphant return and conditions. Roberto Mendez's proposal resonated in Marta's mind like a bell amidst the chaos. Would she be merely a band-aid on Vertex's wound, a marketing ploy to clean up the company's image, or a real chance to finally use her full potential and prove that talent can come from anywhere? The doubt was real, but the temptation to make a difference was even greater. Vertex was on its knees and Marta held all the cards. She pondered all night. She remembered the scornful glances, the hushed giggles, Arthur's arrogance. She remembered the countless hours she spent cleaning tables where million-dollar decisions were made, while she, with her academic and humanitarian background, was invisible. Revenge, she realized, wouldn't be denying the opportunity, but accepting it and transforming it into something no one expected. The next morning, Marta called Roberto Mendez. Her calm and assertive voice surprised the council member. "Mr. Mendez, I accept the proposal, but I have some conditions." Mendez, relieved, promptly replied, "Marta, we're willing to negotiate. Tell us what you need." And Marta began to dictate the rules of her return. She didn't just want a position to clean up the image. She wanted real power, autonomy to implement profound changes. First, and perhaps most crucial, Marta didn't want to be a trophy. "I don't want to be just the ex-janitor who became a director for your marketing campaigns, Mr. Mendez," she began. "I want my work to be genuine. My main focus will be mapping forgotten talent within Vertex, people in entry-level positions who have potential and brilliant ideas, but who, like me, are ignored by the traditional hierarchy." Mendez was impressed. That went far beyond what he had imagined. "Understood, and how would we do that?" "I'll create an active listening program," Marta continued, her voice gaining strength. "I'll talk to janitors, security guards, receptionists, IT technicians, administrative assistants. I'll give a voice to those who never had one. I want to understand their frustrations, their ideas, their dreams. I guarantee that Vertex is losing valuable talent and insights because it doesn't know how to look beyond job titles." Secondly, Marta demanded autonomy to restructure part of HR, especially regarding selection and employee appreciation processes. The selection criteria need to be reviewed. Titles and prestigious universities cannot be the only indicators of potential. Life experience, resilience, problem-solving skills, these qualities are just as important or even more so, she argued, clearly thinking of her own journey. Third, she requested a dedicated budget for her hidden talent development department, with complete freedom to invest in training, mentoring, and even interdepartmental transfers for these newly discovered employees. She wanted to create a clear path for professional growth within Vertex, a path that wasn't exclusive to the CEO's children or the CEO's friends. Finally and subtly, Mary made it clear that Arthur Brando's departure needed to be definitive. She didn't want to see him in the hallways or participating in meetings she attended. For the CEO and Robert Mendez, who already considered Arthur a problem, this condition wasn't an obstacle, but a convenience. Vertex, desperate to stem the bleeding in its reputation and stock value, accepted all of Mary's conditions. Was it a risk? Yes, but it was a necessary risk, and they felt that somehow Mary was the only one capable of putting out the fire she had indirectly started. Mary's return to Vertex Capital was a discreet event, but with immense symbolic weight. She didn't enter through the front door with spotlights, as one might expect of a trophy. Instead, Mary started her new job in the Human Resources Department, in a simple office but with an authority that extended far beyond its walls. In the following days, the press reported on the rehiring of Mary Lima, the cleaner, who became an executive. Vertex released an official statement praising Mary's strategic vision and innate talent, and announcing the new internal talent development program. The company's image began, slowly, to recover. The stock decline stopped, and the online narrative began to shift from the Vertex scandal to the Vertex turnaround. Mary, now in her new role, dove in headfirst. She began scheduling meetings with employees from various departments, people who were once like her, invisible. Her goal wasn't to judge, but to listen. She wanted to understand Vertex from the bottom up, not from the top down. And what she was about to discover in the hallways and corners of that multinational corporation would prove that the company's true wealth wasn't in the numbers on the spreadsheets, but in the minds and hearts of its employees. What would Mary find in her conversations? What talents would she unearth? And how would the woman who listens forever change the culture of one of the country's largest companies? The journey was just beginning. Mary's new office was modest, yes, but her power within it was immense. She didn't have the CEO's panoramic view, nor Arthur's mahogany desk. Instead, her space was functional, and the door was always open. Her main work tool wasn't a state-of-the-art computer, but her ability to listen. Mary became the listening woman, the unexpected confidant in a company that always valued what was said in closed boardrooms more than in the service corridors. She started on the lower floors, where most of the administrative staff spent their days. She talked to Lucy, the cafeteria worker, who knew every director's coffee order by heart, and who, between cups, had precious insights into team dynamics. Lucy, with her years of wisdom, revealed that the intern who made the video, Peter, wasn't just a kid trying to go viral. He was a programming genius, but stuck doing copies because he lacked a who knows, someone to recommend him for a better position. Then Mary talked to Carlos, the night shift security guard, a former military man with enviable discipline and a photographic memory for faces and times. Carlos, who saw the empty building at night, had ideas about security optimization and access control that could save Vertex a fortune, but he had never been heard. She also sat down with Andrew, the IT technician who spent his day running around solving internet and printer problems. Andrew, a self-taught cybersecurity expert, had identified vulnerabilities in the system that could lead to serious data breaches, but his reports were always filed away by his superiors. Each conversation was a treasure. Mary didn't just listen. She asked questions, investigated, connected the dots. She wrote everything down in a simple notebook, but each note represented untapped potential. The ideas simmering in the corners of Vertex were like gold nuggets waiting to be panned. Frustration was palpable in many, the feeling of invisibility, the certainty that their talents were being wasted. At first, some employees were apprehensive. "The new director will just take our ideas and take the credit," they murmured. But Mary's authenticity, her genuine gaze, and her humility soon broke down the barriers. She didn't promise miracles, but she guaranteed that their voices would be heard by those who really mattered. Changes began to be felt. Peter, the intern who went viral with the video, was the first to be rescued. Mary called him for a conversation. "Peter, I know you made that video without thinking about the consequences, but your action ultimately exposed something important, and it showed me something else, your technological skills. Tell me about your personal projects." Peter, surprised, talked about the apps he developed in his free time, about his passion for artificial intelligence. 2 weeks later, Peter was in a new department, working with the software development team, with a clear career plan and a mentor. The smile on his face was worth gold. Peter's story, once just an ordinary intern, spread like wildfire through Vertex. It was proof that Mary wasn't kidding. People started seeking her out, opening their hearts, sharing their ideas. The flow of information to Mary became an avalanche, clear proof that a volcano of untapped talent lay beneath the polished surface of Vertex. While Mary built bridges and unearthed talent, Arthur Brandon was in his own private hell. Isolated, he tried to rebuild, but every door he knocked on slammed shut. The Vertex scandal had become a stain on his resume. He was the example of what not to do in the corporate world. No one wanted to be associated with the man who tried to humiliate the cleaner who had become a symbol of dignity. His empire crumbled, piece by piece. The culture at Vertex Capital slowly began to change. The executives, previously enclosed in their bubbles, began to see the entry-level employees with new eyes. Internal mentorship programs, skills development workshops for all levels, and a suggestion box that actually worked began to emerge. Vertex was learning through pain that true innovation and growth come from within, from all its employees. Mary, the woman who listens, was becoming the silent architect of a new Vertex. But this was only the beginning. How many other Peters, Lucias, Carols, and Andres existed in the company's hallways? And how would Mary's rise and the new culture of appreciation affect Vertex's power structure itself? The future of the company, and many of its employees, was being rewritten by a former cleaner. The buzz in the hallways of Vertex Capital was no longer about gossip or malicious jokes. Now, it was a hum of hope, ideas, and renewed energy. Mary, the woman who listens, was reaping the rewards of her work. Her method was simple but revolutionary for such a rigid company. She gave voice and, more importantly, she gave opportunity. Carlos, the doorman with a photographic memory and brilliant ideas about security, was next. Mary referred him to a training program in security and risk management. In 6 months, Carlos was leading the security team, implementing the optimizations he had envisioned from the front desk. Vertex not only saved a significant amount of money, but also raised its security protocols to a new level. Carlos, who had previously felt invisible, now had a coordinator's badge and a gleam in his eye worth more than any salary. Andrew, the IT technician concerned about cybersecurity, was transferred to a special projects team. With the support and budget Mary secured for him, Andrew developed a threat monitoring system that shielded Vertex from potential cyber attacks. He who was once the support guy was now the digital security genius, presenting reports to the CEO himself. The stories of Peter, Carlos, and Andrew were not exceptions. They were the new normal. Mary created an internal talent bank system where employees could register their skills and interests, even if not directly related to their current roles. She encouraged courses, offered mentorship, and promoted idea exchanges where employees from different levels and departments could interact and collaborate. The once rigid hierarchy began to dissolve in the name of innovation and efficiency. Vertex Capital, once known for its corporate coldness and elitist culture, was transforming. Employee turnover, previously high, began to decrease dramatically. The organizational climate improved, reflected in satisfaction surveys that skyrocketed. The company's image in the media was no longer that of scandal, but of the company that values its grassroots talent, a success story on how diversity of thought can generate results. And Arthur Brandon, well, his life was the opposite. The doors that closed never reopened. His name, once synonymous with power, was now a reminder of his failure. He tried everything, reactivating contacts, seeking positions at other companies, but the stain of the Vertex scandal was indelible. No one wanted to risk their own reputation for someone so associated with arrogance and humiliation. Arthur, the prince who humiliated cleaning ladies, was forced to face the reality that his powerful surname was no longer a passport to success. He found himself relegated to professional ostracism, a bitter consequence of his own actions. Justice for some has its own ways. Mary, on the other hand, was at the peak of her career. She didn't seek the spotlight, but the results of her work were undeniable. The CEO of Vertex, who initially saw her as a solution to an image crisis, now saw her as a brilliant strategist and an inspiring leader. He trusted her. Her fellow directors, previously skeptical, now consulted her and respected her opinions. Mary was no longer the cleaning lady. She was the visionary who was redefining the concept of success within a multinational corporation. But despite all the victories, Mary's journey at Vertex still held surprises. There were still many hidden talents waiting to be discovered and a culture to be further solidified. What would be Mary's next challenge? And how would this new Vertex, more humane and innovative, continue to chart its course into the future? Vertex Capital was no longer the same company Mary knew as a cleaning lady. The walls were still polished marble, and the offices mirrored, but now there was a different shine in people's eyes. The culture of valuing human beings, once a utopia, was taking root thanks to Mary's persistence and vision. Her department, which began as a bet to contain a crisis, had become the beating heart of innovation and well-being in the company. Mary, the listening woman, was no longer just an executive. She was a mentor, an inspiration, a living legend within Vertex. Her schedule was always full, not with formal meetings about numbers, but with deep conversations with employees at all levels. She created internal exchange programs where a receptionist could spend a day in the finance department, or a security guard could participate in leadership training. The idea was to demystify positions and show that each person brought a universe of unique skills and perspectives. The impact was reflected in impressive numbers. Vertex's productivity increased by 12% last year, driven by solutions created by frontline employees who were previously ignored. Employee satisfaction reached a record high, and Vertex Capital was named one of the best companies to work for in Brazil. The press, which had previously attacked her, now openly praised her, highlighting the Mary Lima case as an example of how empathy and inclusion can transform the corporate world. The CEO himself, who was previously a stern and distant man, had changed. He began making regular visits to Mary's department, not to supervise but to learn. He saw firsthand how the dedication of a single person could rewrite the history of an entire corporation. At one of the most important board meetings of the year, with investors and directors from all over the world present, he made sure to give Mary the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the CEO began with a proud smile, "today we will not only talk about profits and losses, but about something much more valuable, human capital. And to talk about this, there is no one better than the person who taught us this lesson so brilliantly, with you, Mary Lima." The room, filled with bigwigs, turned to Mary. There were no more giggles or disdainful looks. There was admiration and respect. Mary wasn't wearing an expensive suit or an impeccable hairstyle. She was in an elegant business outfit, but with the simplicity and dignity that characterized her. She spoke about the importance of looking beyond diplomas, of investing in people, of creating an environment where everyone feels valued. Her words were direct, full of truth and experience. At the end of her presentation, the room erupted in applause. Some even stood up. It was the recognition she deserved, and it came from those who had previously seen her as a shadow. While Mary was being applauded, Arthur Brandot was somewhere probably trying to reinvent himself again, but without success. Vertex had become a symbol of resilience and transformation, and he, an indelible stain on its past. His downfall served as a reminder that arrogance has a high price. Mary's story wasn't just the story of a former cleaner who rose to a position of power. This was the story of a company that learned to look inward, correct its mistakes, and become a better place. More importantly, it was living proof that true intelligence and leadership aren't tied to labels, but to the ability to transform lives and environments. But what would happen now that Vertice had risen again? What would Mary's next challenges be? Would the renewed company reach new heights of success and innovation? And how would Mary's story continue to inspire a world that still needs to learn to value the talent hidden in plain sight? Mary Lima was no longer just the woman who listens or the ex-janitor. She was now a legendary figure inside and outside Vertice Capital. Her story, told and retold, inspired lectures at universities and panel discussions on diversity and inclusion in the corporate environment. Vertice, under the influence of the new culture Mary helped build, not only recovered its image, but became a model of innovative and humane business. The hidden talent program she devised was copied by other large companies, all searching for their own Mary in the hallways of their buildings. Vertice expanded its operations, attracting the best professionals in the market, not just for competitive salaries, but for its reputation as a company that truly valued its employees. Mary remained at the helm of her department, which grew and became a strategic pillar of Vertice. She never became complacent, always seeking new talent, new ideas, new ways to ensure that no one's voice was silenced. Her humble nature and sharp mind were the perfect combination to keep Vertice on the right track. She proved that true leadership lies not in giving orders, but in inspiring and empowering. As for Arthur Brandot, the silence about him became almost total. His name was rarely mentioned at Vertice, and when it was as a warning, a reminder of what happened when arrogance surpassed common sense. He never again achieved a prominent position, condemned to a mediocre professional career and oblivion, the antithesis of Mary's legacy. The story of Mary Lima, the janitor who became a visionary, is a powerful reminder. It shows us that talent can be anywhere, often hidden under the most unexpected uniforms, that dignity and intelligence can silence the loudest arrogance, and that sometimes for a company to find its true brilliance, all it takes is someone with the courage to look at those who have always been invisible, to listen to the voices that were once only whispers, and thus rewrite an entire story.